And we're live. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thrilled to be joined with Reshma Block. Reshma was a former CTO at Tricon Residential and a huge career span. We hope to touch on a little bit today around technology, starting in Intel, working through bio, a big long span of career of working in tech and driving technology outcomes, all organizations. One of my favorite parts of your bio is talking about how you connect the uplift in securitization relative to the automation technology you've done. That is something that you don't see very often from a technology perspective, is actually talking about the balance sheet and not only just expenses savings and automation. So that is why I'm part of the reason, well, also, and every time we connected, we seem to kind of run on about incredible conversations that are ethereal, academic, and practical at the same time. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. So everybody, getting to hell yes. So when we talk about getting to hell yes, we're obviously talking about positioning, we're talking about change, we're talking about capturing the moment where people are seeking to solve their own problems. And one of the things that's really interesting about talking to someone who's a CTO, especially an organization that grew as fast as Tricon, is to cover off the internal positioning and selling and angling of everything, and especially when it talks about technology, particularly when you result in the outcomes that you were able to talk about with respect to the things that occurred and the benefits that are all driven to the organization, your residents, the asset management, and even your bankers, right? So that's an exciting awareness that we don't really hear very often, especially for internal folks. And so like we always, for everyone who's on the call today following us live, obviously add in some comments and we'll be able to respond to those in real time. And then if you are in following us in the podcast or catching it later, any comments we capture there, we can be able to respond to, we'll get notified. So with that, like we always start this off, Reshma, just a little bit about yourself and then getting into the problems that you were, in the position to solve and then now what you're working on next. And obviously let's get into the hell yes motion that you're able to adopt to achieve those kind of things that you achieved in your tenure at Tricon.
Yeah. So I guess I'll cover the stuff that's not in the LinkedIn bio because everybody can read that, right? Why be repetitive? So how I got involved in Tricon, we'll just kind of jump straight to that after almost 25 years really in tech, right? You mentioned Silicon Valley and all of that is, opportunity came up where the COO today, Alan O'Brien, who's a close personal friend of my husband's at the time, approached him for an opportunity for the first head of IT position that Tricon was hiring. They hadn't had one at the time. And when my husband and he were talking about it, he said, actually, this really fits what Reshma's doing. And so up until that point, I'd been doing digital transformations for medium, large companies. This sounded like a big digital transformation type, initiative, right? That the head of or CTO position would really have to undertake. And so it sounded interesting. And more than anything, two things really were compelling to me because there were other opportunities I was looking at the time, and this was right in the middle of COVID. The things that sounded interesting to me, and it's been interesting my entire career, is there friction that needs to be solved here, right? Or is there a blue sky opportunity? Someone hasn't done something here yet. And SFR was still relatively new, in late 2020. And yeah, there wasn't really a lot of good enterprise tech out there. So that was really interesting to me. And then the second thing was, how cool would it be to be able to work with a friend of mine of 20 years, right? To be able to build this together. And so I decided not to stay in Silicon Valley, which is where the other opportunity was, and jump over to real estate, which, a lot of people don't know. I also grew up in real estate. I was an owner operator. That's what my entire family does in the hospitality industry. And I vowed my entire life never to jump back into real estate after that. But, it felt right at the time to come full circle and join Tricon. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, considering and how big do you recall how big Tricon was when you joined?
Yeah, about 27,000 homes at the time. We were public on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And then right around 9 months after I joined, we went US IPO. And so I think we're doing about 500 million right at the time in SFR, US SFR. And so, yeah, it was much smaller. for sure.
And I mean, and IPOs are character building experiences.
For sure.
And as the chief technology officer, I mean, you are accountable for a lot of the sign-offs, with respect to controls, audit, all that sort of stuff. I mean, you're 9 months in, you're just catching your feet. Like, what's that feel like?
Yeah, 9 months in, we had also, I think, announced at the time a Tricon Residential rebrand or integration, right, between the Toronto and Tustin offices. So that was happening, where we're merging, for the techies back there, multiple Microsoft tenants, right,
Yep.
into one. That's happening. Then the IPO is happening, and yeah, that definitely, for just to be candid, puts hair on your chest, right? Because there's
Yep.
a lot going on. Luckily, I had some local contacts, audit partners here in Orange County that put us in the front of the line from a tech internal audit perspective. They were able to throw some support at us. Shout out to Deloitte and the Orange County Deloitte audit partners for helping us during that crazy time. And we were able to shore up our systems. Tricon has a great IT team as well. Shout out to the IT team and leaders there at Tricon. They were amazing in getting year one SOX passed because, we have an all hands on deck, and, shoring up those controls wasn't easy, but the team had some experience behind them. Had some great support for sure.
Yeah, I haven't gone through myself. I've been shotgun on it, and I've had to go through international acquisitions on it. And I spent time at Deloitte and did 10 years in consulting, and man, it was crazy. Some of the things that we'd have to hear, and then just the historical historical reference points for when you need to be prepared from an IPO perspective, especially on US. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for certain.
No, and then, post IPO brings a whole different level of scrutiny, right, and a way of operating. And so, your entire fourth quarter consumed in, kind of audit, readiness prep. You make sure that your controls are passing, right, in order for the year ends to close properly. And then, all your systems have to now meet certain expectations. All your general controls that now have to be measured either on a quarterly, weekly, whatever the requirements are, on a regular basis. And so how often, how frequent, what you changes in the. And so, some people view it as we kind of slowed down a little bit, but in other respects, we also stabilized. We created more of an enterprise scale capability. And so to me, when I look back at it, it almost happened at the right time from just a tech architecture perspective, because we were looking to enterprise scale. We were looking to build, that architecture that we can then double, triple the amount of homes on the back end capability. And the IPO and the ITGCs helped us really kind of force that to occur.
Well, what's really, I think and recognizing going through an IPO is often a once in a lifetime experience. And then growing a company, tripling it in that time frame can also be, considered a once in a lifetime experience.
Depending on how you look at it, yeah.
Yeah, how the numbers are.
Depending on
right. And a lot of like the being a public company thrusts certain controls upon you that not private companies don't have to deal with. And so you're kind of like going through this. You've got to be fast and slow at the same time.
Yeah.
And we talked about when we first connected around enterprise architecture, and as a huge fan and lifelong follower of our enterprise architecture and how that can enable an organization and create that fast and slow organization. Talking about different systems of record, systems of engagement, systems of innovation, systems of integration, right? And how all these things come together. How did you? So then that's forms part of the problem statement, right? Around what you need to solve for. And so how did you begin to address the friction points, the gaps, and really even if everything was running perfect, to 4x a business, you need different things, right? How did you begin to start thinking about, okay, here's the things, and then let's add one more thing to it, is that this is an asset-based business, not necessarily a technology business. So in order to move prioritization for some of the initiatives that need to be done in order to achieve those objectives, you got to do some internal selling. And so how do you begin to help and navigate and recognize the opportunities for what needs to start when, where?
And so you hit the nail right on the head. We started with the assets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is such an asset heavy business. That's the balance sheet is everything. And so, I started really assessing the technology and the full tech stack for enterprise scalability. One, how stable were things
Mm-hmm.
across the entire tech stack? Two, could it multiply and scale, right? If we were going to grow, and we had some growth aspirations clearly. And three, how was it meeting the customer and employee experience, right? What was the friction points to be able to deliver upon, what the technology was meant to do? And so one of the first projects we started required us to really look at the internal ways in which we were, acquiring those assets. And so we used a concept called design thinking.
Yep.
I had spun off a couple of folks that were, really good internally at building the technology up until that point to just focus on innovation, purely
Mm-hmm.
innovation. And with that, bring in design thinking concepts. So
Mm-hmm.
interviewing users, interviewing folks inside, all the way from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, whatever it was, and understanding what are all the different friction points, what's the current process, what are we spending way too much time on, whether it's, swivel chair back and forth, whether it's, lost communications, time, energy,
Mm-hmm.
lost money, really, when it comes to, acquiring, managing, dispositioning the assets, whatever it was. How can we make that better, especially if in that particular time frame, the major business focus was growth, and so we
Mm-hmm.
focused on the systems that were going to help us grow. And so we built the system that helped us really focused on growth using design thinking. And what we thought was going to be the solution ended up being completely a different solution after we had gone through the empathy cycle
Yep.
and really relating to what the users were experiencing. And out, we were dealing with not so much a technology architecture problem, which we did have, don't get me wrong, we had to
Yep.
change the architecture, but we also had a business process automation challenge.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't really business process automated a lot. And so if we're going to, rapidly scale, then we had to really look at automating much more than we did. And that's really kind of what created some of the systems that we still have in place today.
So what's interesting for those listening, like design thinking was I think it came out of IDEO in Chicago.
It
I hope
did. Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
IDEO
Mhm.
Chicago, and then modeled a bit by the Doblin Group that was ultimately acquired by Deloitte. And the
Mhm.
premises in design thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm going off memory here, is you take a look at a gap and you seek to diverge. So you take the kind of current state that you have, you take divergent thinking, so you get wider, and then you begin to eliminate alternatives based on feasibility, viability, and
Oh God, you're going to test me on this.
I know well, there's a third one, and then you begin to eliminate some of the issues that you get done, and then you begin to compress your outcomes and your options.
Mhm.
The
Right.
whole premise of design thinking is let's stand back, look at the problem, design feasibility, desirability, and then you back it all up, and then you figure out, okay, what's going to work for the end user, and it's very end user oriented, and that helps you begin to prioritize which problems to solve, so that you can begin to get to a result set that is different than how you maybe originally would have perceived the problem. Because go ahead.
And I was going to say one of the biggest benefits of it is that when we ideated with the users, right?
Right.
And so when you're looking at building the UIs or you're looking at how the business processes needed to be automated, the users were there doing a lot of the work and giving the feedback and trying to figure out how to, update and modify it. Now, nothing, challenges because users then have to face what is our process? We never documented
Mm-hmm.
this before.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we actually want to do this? And so you're also dealing with document business process itself as well.
And Tricon is known across the industry for having built their own system.
Mhm.
And so their build or buy is a decision point that comes from this needs discovery. What was that like? Like choosing to build your own system versus COTS, commercial off the shelf, and then configure and modify.
So when that was largely the thinking, is we build everything, right? Big behemoth systems at the time. My mantra has always been, in my 30 tech, buy as much as possible, because the vendor buying from, the partners that become an extension of your IT team, essentially have way more resources than you ultimately have to be able to manage an enterprise scalable tech, especially with, small and medium-sized businesses. And remember, I'd consulted for 10 years doing digital transformations, and so I developed lots of vendor partners and great, resources before I'd gotten here in lots of different industries. And so actually it was quite a bit of a discussion to buy versus build. And so we really ended up bringing in third-party off-the-shelf solutions that were, whether it was new low-code platforms, whether it was applications that were off the shelf, excuse me, to solve problems that they had started to build. Those became more buy decisions when I joined. Still is my mantra today, to buy as much as possible, because build, one, by build it, your requirements have probably changed, right? And two, you don't really have an extension or a team then that's helping you support it, scale it, keep it current and updated. You're having to do it all yourself, and that just balloons your total cost of ownership.
And then, but then eventually you guys landed where you landed.
Interesting discussion. It's an interesting discussion.
Well, that's an interesting conversation about.
It is a combination of both.
Okay, it is a combination of both now.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of platforms. There's still some, create your own or build your own internally. And so it's a combination of both. I would say when I came in, it was largely build your own, and now it's probably a little bit more balanced.
So as you're coming in and navigating into that recommendation, you're speaking with the executive, you're considering all the outcomes, you've talked to all the users, but as you're navigating towards that, there's a point where you've got to kind of like, you've got to position the recommendation as strategic, and here's what we're going to do. Here's a plan, here's a roadmap, here's the funding, here's the budget, here's the different cycles, here's all the different stuff. And in order to get to where we want to go, and by the way, the business is growing at a different, at a higher velocity than probably anyone could have even imagined when you were first putting together the blueprint. And you get to that point and you're like, okay, here's how we're going to do it. How did you begin to corral support? Because you don't show up and just say, reveal, here's Reshma's view of the world. How did you begin to corral support for that as you're leading into your decision point?
So great question. Right off the bat, I started working with the IT leaders, understanding the tech stack, but we created an innovation playbook. And in the first year, that innovation playbook kind of became that philosophical view on, how I want to run IT. And that innovation playbook really outlined a few core concepts, right? Which is one, in order to build an enterprise scalable architecture to facilitate growth, we need to do a couple of core things really right, which is not new, but maybe new to Tricon, just not necessarily new to the industry, which is one, we really have to get away from bespoke proprietary type solutions, and we have to really focus on open API, open architecture, right? That's kind of standard in other industries when it comes to IT. That was number one. Number two, we have to be able to, measure our total cost of ownership. And so when we look at, everything from license costs to salaries, where is that going to what business units, all that kind of stuff? How are we able to measure the total cost of ownership? And then number three, we have to be innovate and have an innovation funnel using design thinking. And as we do projects and prioritize projects, it's got to be based on actual problems and not just tech for tech's sake, right?
Yeah.
And so what are we solving versus throwing, oh my God, this is a great new tool out there. It looks like it could solve this one thing. Let's go put it in. No, it's got to be a much bigger, holistic kind of phase-gated process. And so we implemented an innovation funnel and a phase-gated process. And so really, innovation play was kind of this visual diagram that I can use to explain to the executives, this is how I want to run IT. This is how we're going to organize it. And this is, what we want to be able to accomplish with it, so that we can create really the end goal. And the back end was something that, was a very reliable, scalable architecture. The front end, the UIs, all of that can change, will change, would have to change consistently. But hopefully you're not constantly rebuilding your back end. And so when you put a data warehouse in, that data warehouse can stay for 3, 4, 5 years, right?
Yep.
Maybe your reporting tool changes because front ends change all the time, but your data warehouse doesn't have to get rebuilt all the time. And so that's kind of how it was really writing an innovation playbook that could be communicated.
Interesting. And so when you're deploying that innovation playbook, that I'm going to hear correctly, like that kind of gives you the roadmap for ingesting problems and pushing out solutions. And then the stage gate approach to everything, I'm guessing is kind of a waterfall approach to deployments.
It was just from an innovation standpoint of what was prioritized. And then of course, as development went on, it was all agile based, right? But how we used initiatives and projects, because everybody had something they wanted to get done and tons of tools. But yeah, that was all waterfall based. Yeah.
And we typically saw that with public companies. You had to have that controls in place, right? So you have this kind of fast and slow again around the agile pieces that you have in the innovation playbook, and then the deployment models that follow a stage gate deployment along with structured testing, et cetera. All the kind of fun stuff.
Right.
How did you find
layer and focus security?
Layer and security,
right? Not security, focus security, because the environment was changing rapidly out there too. Yeah.
And it's also consumer facing. Like it wasn't just an internal, right? You guys have consumer facing stuff. So you've got consumers that have access to the system, and they are less controllable than the employees.
Right. And our executives had really great ideas too, right? Our CEO really wanted the all-in-one resident app. And so in order to deliver on things like that, we had to think about, our architecture deliver. And you can't in bespoke, proprietary type implementations where I can't pull out data for smart home and be able to integrate it into an app, right? And so, we kind of think about, what as a technologist, your ecosystem can deliver, what your total cost of ownership is. Are you running as efficiently and effectively as possible to where you have those dollars that you can then invest, because your CEO, CFO, whoever has an idea that, that maybe can generate some new investors or some, new interest that if you deliver on, ultimately can move the needle either on the balance sheet or maybe even on the P&L side. So.
But at the time, this must have felt like radical thinking. Like the innovation playbook was
on their side, on Tricon side, or on my side, which
on Tricon side, on the Tricon side. Yeah. Like in real estate, and generally speaking, if you take 4 real estate people and put them around a coffee table, and one says, "Hey, we're going to do a combination of agile design thinking, and we're going to think about what users want to do. We're going to do a mix of."
It was crazy town. Crazy town. Yeah.
So how did you get there?
I mean, I don't think the industry had heard of open APIs 4 years ago, right?
No.
That was like foreign to a lot of nowadays, right? I think repetition.
Yeah.
It was foreign to some of the folks I'd worked with internally in IT as well, pulling things out, a little bit of kind of reframing, rethinking about things in a different way, kind of helping them understand that, look, if we want to get to point B, point A is not going to get us here. But this is where the vendor partners really come in, right? And this is why I'm such a big advocate of buy versus build, is when you have great vendor partners, and I've been doing this my entire career, even at Intel, when we had to build these data ecosystems that never existed post 9/11, the Microsofts, the Veritoses, the Dells, they all stepped up to the plate and helped us build things that even Intel didn't have resources for, right? No one is in technology resources. I don't care how big you are. And so, this is why it's so important that we technologists partner with the right vendors, and the vendors understand where we're trying to ultimately get to, because we're building that ecosystem that's meant to last, but we need to do it with partners that are going to go along with us, right? And they're going to continue to step with us. We can't do it right out of the gate. And so if a smart home today, for instance, is a closed API, can't get data out of, I need you to know that if I need to build X, Y, and Z or a res app that needs to be open, then give me your roadmap to get there, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't have to be tomorrow, but if you're willing to partner with me, let's do it together and get there because you see where we're going. And doing things like quarterly business reviews. I'll share where I'm going, you share where you're
Mhm.
going. Those are just best practices that, outside of our industry, we do all the time, but
Yeah.
something norm necessarily all the time here, right? And so that's where longevity in the partnership really works, and those kinds of disciplines really work because some of our partners really did a lot of things. Yardi did a lot of things different for us at Tricon
Mhm.
in the SFR space. They get a bad rap, but really, when we sat them down and actually came to the table and saw what we were doing outside of their platform, they're like, "Oh yeah, no, we actually need to do a few things differently." And they came to the table and helped us really scale really rapidly when we took on HPA. And so in the back end, seamlessly added 100,000 residents and 20,000 homes literally overnight, right? And within 2 weeks
Well,
scaled.
and then from a data scale perspective, I mean, it's one thing. I mean, from a multifamily perspective, if you're adding 1,000 properties with 27,000 residents, that's one thing. But you're adding 27,000 properties, which is a different order of magnitude when you consider the data architecture from a Yardi side of things. Oh, I mean, and thank you for shouting at Yardi. They don't get a lot. They often don't get loved, and so I'm sure that someone out there is appreciating that
Yeah.
from a Thanksgiving perspective. um, so you're corralling all of this, and what like what other options were really available as you're kind of drafting out this growth plan? And was it clear that they were going to go from 27,000 to 120,000? Was that kind of like part of the problem statement when you originally were drafting the innovation playbook?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. The vision was how do we get to 100,000 homes, right? Like
Mhm.
that was what was, given the objective, the vision, architecturally. Now, look, you always have to balance that with what's the IT budget, right? There's how do you, the push pull, you can have that vision, but you also have to then be able to fund it. And, quite frankly, I think that we did a lot, oftentimes with not always the big, we were very resourceful. We used vendor partners that did a lot for us, quite frankly, as an extension of us, sometimes for free. But yeah, that was always kind of the vision is how do we get there? How do we get to 100,000 homes? Yeah.
So you spoke about like the problem statements, and this is kind of one of the things that is an anchor point in the hell yes conversation is understanding the problem statement of your stakeholders. Now, naturally,
Mhm.
you're not seeking to get someone to write a check, but you are seeking for budget, as you just mentioned. And so, as you're beginning to position this budgeting and this kind of like this roadmap path forward, like how are you seeking to defend the recommendation against what might be a conventional option, right? Or like the pure buy or slam it in, or we're going to do a greenfield and then deploy with footprints. Like how did there can always be a a conventional alternative.
Yeah.
First question, I guess, is was there actually another alternative, like practically speaking, or was it kind of like these are hey everyone, this is really our only choice. If you want to get to where we want to get to.
Yeah, I mean, it depended on what we were attempting to do. The first version of our Res app was like a out of the box, kind of off the shelf version that didn't really, didn't really cut it, quite frankly.
Right.
And so that alternative didn't work, and we had to go more custom, right, in order to be able to bring the features and experiences that we wanted.
Mhm.
Yeah, but why is option first. And here's why: speed to market and cost, right?
Yeah.
The vendor is really absorbing more of the development costs than you are, right? What
Mhm.
you're doing is paying for the licensing, and they're using the scale that they have and passing it across multiple customers, right? And so
Mhm.
you're not necessarily paying for it. So speed to market was always the number one kind of priority to me: is how quickly can we solve this problem,
Yeah.
right? we had a problem to solve. Is there something off the shelf? And off the shelf was always the fastest than building it. Number one, but that brings, cons, flexibility. Can you then, really adapt it to the way you need to? And sometimes you had to shift the business process to adapt it, to use the product the way you wanted to. And that was, again, this is the constant IT challenge, right? Is that push pull between speed and, business requirement needs. But then the business has to be able to slow down, and wait for maybe more custom solution if they're willing to wait. And so that's always this partnership. It's never IT telling people what to do and shoving it in, as much as everybody thought I did that. That's, that really wasn't my choice. I can pick the architecture in the back end because I know what's stable, what things cost, how to maintain a lower cost of ownership. But when it comes to what meets the business requirements, the requirements come from the business at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? They don't come from me. Yeah.
No, I mean, an ideal technology, enterprise technology to manage is one that doesn't need any change, right? But that just doesn't happen, right? It's not, you're not creating work for yourself, right? And then you take a look at like some of the change management that you would have had to control as going through all this stuff and being a public company, like it's a lot. And so when you're thinking about how you're going to go and move this thing forward, right? Like thinking about the first phase of it all being deployed, and there's going to be some bumps in the first deployment, right? And how did you decide where to focus first? Like what was the first deployment? What did the first deployment look like? And what problem did that first deployment solve?
Yeah, when I came in, there were really great test markets out there that were more willing to kind of try something new. And so being on the West Coast, there were markets like Phoenix and folks that were just willing to jump into a new tech, try it out, give us feedback. And so we often started with pilots to get feedback. The challenge is does that then market and their processes replicate across other markets and their processes? And we often found that that's not necessarily the case. And I think every SFR company experiences this, right? In fact, every vendor, every field, industry out there that has a field, you deal with this probably with your customers, right?
Yeah.
Every single business has a little bit of a nuance in how they run their business. In the field. And the challenge after the pilot, was successful, let's say in one market, is uncovering then what those nuances were in every other market that you then had to adapt to.
Yeah, we used to call it a fit gap.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Your fit gap, right? Because there's going to be gaps, and so you kind of like going with a position of like, well, here's what we're going to do, and here's we're going to do a fit gap it, and then if there's of the gaps that are there, we're going to force rank the gaps by regionality, and then get champion sponsorship to fund the gaps, because not all gaps were gaps, right?
Right.
And there's a bit of being judicious around what you're going to include, because what we haven't talked about is when you do customize, you do absorb a maintenance burden that now you own because you chose to customize. If you go with the standard off the shelf, it's going to have its own maintenance, organization behind it that's going to prove it, test it, all those things. But as you begin to kind of like do it your way, now you're responsible for that. And that's
and buy and predict your maintenance burden. 18-22% a year is the standard maintenance burden, right? And you can predict that. You build it yourself. God knows what that maintenance burden ends up being.
Well, particularly when you have like an upgrade in the core system, and now you're accountable for the either upgrade or the maintenance, the testing, and all those different flavors on top that you've chosen to adopt. Which is why we see a lot of organizations go with the built-in process that's already established within the infrastructure, or the software, because it's just like it's generally going to be 80%. And maybe we can figure out and have that kind of like look in the mirror of, are we that different that we need to close the gap on that 20%, or can we adopt the remaining 20% and go from there, right?
Right, exactly, right.
So when you guys deployed, it sounds like did you deploy vertically, like you went end-to-end functions, or you deploy functionally?
Well, it depends. Remember, we kind of redid the entire stack in some capacity, whether it was all new software or redid all the workflows entirely, right? It really depended, quite frankly, and it depended on the priority. It depended on the business model. So deployment could look like really functionally, if you're looking at a construction and project management type software, right? And you're functionally deploying across all modules in that entire application. So either or, it just depended. But at the end of the day, I don't think there were massive, other than a couple of products. I'm trying to think, maybe two or three, four. Actually, maybe there was a good handful. Agile deployments were really the way that we tried to manage change for the most part. Even in massive software rollouts, we managed through Agile, but then the entire cutover, was a big change management system initiative.
So, thank you for sharing all this. This is obviously super interesting to kind of talk through and for people to think about, okay, what are the part of the kind of like internal organs that relate to kind of all this change and deployment, so you can enable that kind of scale so you can have like an outcome. Like $1.5 billion of an uplift on your securitization is nothing to kind of like blink at, right? There's a massive outcome from a technology perspective that is largely carries the cloak of being an overhead operation. And you take a look at the conversations that you have with like technologists in a lot of legacy industries, you kind of don't get that kind of connective tissue between a like balance sheet outcome and then the operation of that technology. So now when you look at where you're going today, like with all this background of creating a scaled machine that delivered that kind of outcome, and you're out in the market now with your kind of new, let's say fresh eyes or new opportunities before you, how are you taking a look at the things that are before you right now to think about? Because to some degree, this like you've got to, there's an assessment of what's the right thing to do at the right moment with whoever you're talking to right now. Because the playbook isn't the same playbook.
Yeah. The playbook from 3, 4, 5 years ago, right, is a totally different environment, quite frankly, right? I mean, we're a completely different market. What I'm hearing out there right now from other colleagues operating margins are being squeezed, right? Customer experience, I think, is going to be more key than ever. I remember coming to this industry and asking an executive who'd been here a long time, said, hey, what happens when, ultimately rent growth, things start to stable out and, we end up being kind of in the same growth patterns as way more mature industries, right? Think about airlines, think about, other industries that kind of, even hotels, Marriott versus other commodity brands, things like that, where, at the end of the day, what wins is the customer experience, right? Not the customer service, the reactive response, because now that's table stakes with social media, and you get, kind of if you don't respond quickly and in the best way possible. But really, I go back to those, this is 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, moments that wow, right? You and I have had some conversations around this. Are we at the bottom now, right? Because of how competitive things are and how transparent things are for a new renter and a new resident to go find the best home in the industry, down the block. Is it really just that, cheapest price point? Or we learn from other industries like the hotels, airlines. I sit on a board for a hospital, and we're talking about patient experience because, we learned that loyalty matters even in a patient experience when it comes to hospitals, right? And so is that something that our industry can learn from? And can we start creating those moments that wow proactively as opposed to just being good customer service responders, if you will? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
and that's really kind of what I'm thinking about these days.
It is interesting when you take a look at like legacy industries and their growth curves, right? Like the grow at all costs has a certain priority to it, and then the operate at least cost has a different priority to it. And the operate at least cost has a reflection usually based on a compressed or stagnating revenue curve, and that revenue curve You're going to have inflation that's chewing away from operational profits. And that inflationary curve is very difficult to kind of like to defend on a price times quantity basis. But then if we start reducing the quantity because we're getting more effective with our technology, then you're kind of like insulated from the increase that maybe your competitors or your peers might be.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting from a real estate perspective is it's shocking to me how many people don't consider this as a recurring revenue business. Like it really is. And so when you look at CX and where CX motions are the strongest, health insurance, banking, health insurance financials, you see like you see a ton of acknowledgement that the lifetime customer value and that whole concept of lifetime customer value is something we're all mobilizing towards. In fact, you get your valuation has a lot to do with your lifetime customer value. So what's my share? So concepts like what's my share of wallet, what's my LTV, all those things on a per unit basis.
It's not something we talk about here much. Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I find it like these are fundamental business concepts in conventional recurring revenue businesses. And I feel like we're really at an uncomfortable acknowledgement of that right now. And people are kind of looking at each other going, geez, I guess it's been like that all along, but they're not. It feels uncomfortable.
Great example of this is when Blackstone bought Jersey Mike's, right? $6 billion. Enormous valuation, not a single piece of real estate. Right. So recurring royalty revenue from the franchises. Right. It's always been like this, to your point.
Yeah.
And so something in our industry but again, having come from the hospitality world where, royalty fees were everything, that's something that, I think about a lot is that's really what's always driven valuations is that recurring revenue, that subscription model that, what Netflix got valued on, right? Like, what is that repeatable, predictable, revenue stream that, you can then measure 3, 4, 5 years out.
Right. And if you can build a system around that to systematize that capture of that revenue, and even better, the growth of that revenue on a per unit basis, then you're thinking about things like average revenue per customer, like our average revenue per account. You're thinking about things in terms of those things, but it's funny because like just maybe even last year we stopped using the word tenant,
right?
And we're thinking about terms in terms of residents, but really they're customers,
right?
And so like that's an interesting shift.
That's an interesting question. Our interesting point is, do we view our residents as customers? And I think that they are. I think that they're a customer like any other customer in any other industry, and we should treat them that way, right? Like from the moment they are interested, they're a customer. And when, they're looking to churn, we should be concerned about what they're, potentially, right? And measuring that, and then what their lifetime value is. And when we look at them as a customer, I think there is a heightened level of responsibility as well that comes with that. I think as a resident, we look at them almost after they've landed as opposed to before and once they've left us. And there may be an opportunity, on both ends there.
So what have you seen we'll dip in resident experience a little bit here. Like, given the gap, let's just call it a general gap because we're talking about awareness through the end. From a retention perspective, what do you imagine would be an emerging solution, or what are we going to start seeing from a retention perspective, or maybe what is a novel way of thinking about that customer and share of wallet and all these kind of like other industry metrics that people obsess over that could come over into SFR?
Yeah, I mean, some of the basics I think still apply, right? Especially with the way AI is now developed. I remember struggling 6, 7, 8 years ago to try to figure out what an LTV is for a customer in a particular industry. How do you actually measure a lifetime value today? Do we know what the lifetime value of a customer is today, right? Can they come back, and rent from us? Can their children come and rent from us? Have we figured out that model yet? Their college student, come back and rent from us. Whatever the case may be, I don't think that we've really thought that through. And so I think some of the basics are still some of the things we still have to figure out in this industry is what is a customer's true lifetime value when they rent from us. Number one, do we when we look at renewals as a way to measure maybe churn,
Mhm.
and I don't know that we're really paying attention to churn rates the way we should be looking at churn models and churn rates the way other industries really treat that as kind of gold, right? And as the holy grail of ensuring that you're not spending all this extra money trying to capture a new customer because you're really hyper focused on limiting the amount of churn that's happening in your current customer base, right? And what it is that they need to stay, how you're improving your product as a result, how you're
Mhm.
responding to them, are you meeting them where they need to be met, when they need to be met, things like that. And so I don't know that we're even doing, thinking about some of those basics, right? But now with the way AI is working, if you have that data and you have access to all of that data with your customers, how they're contacting you, what they're upset about, why they're renewing, when they're renewing, why they're not renewing, all those pieces of information, even, what kind of, home they're living in today could
Mhm.
feed to being much more knowledgeable about your business and the customers that are in your business today that, like the hotels and the airlines and some of those industries are, that we're just not yet.
What I find is this two pieces of information that keep kind of like recurring in kind of the news that I'm following, and it's that like the gap between why an operator feels that the residents left and the residents' definition of why they left are like upside down, right? Like the
Yeah,
operator feels
yeah,
that they left because of rent and maybe they got a better job, and maintenance is like number 8 or 9, and then the resident says it's because open work orders, inspections and whatever, and asset performance by in their terms, like, am I getting what I paid for, right? And I find it really interesting that gap emerges because you're not really understanding, to your point, the exit data around why people are leaving. And there might have been a chance if someone's going from a 2 bedroom to a 3 bedroom to actually keep them within the portfolio. But because you didn't know, like when I was doing banking work, we did a lot of work like around people's, obviously, like your first bank account, because you rarely change your banking details. But like ultimately, when you get that first mortgage, now you're kind of like in the pay zone from a bank perspective,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They want you, they want they want all your mortgages, they want your IRA, they want all that stuff. And so they want that, they consider the share of wallet and they consider lifetime
exactly.
customer value. They're willing to spend anything to get you to sign up for a payroll account because they
Right,
know the second you're checking your payroll is being deposited there, they've
right,
got everything, they can start activating everything. And
yeah,
that is, it's so commonplace in other
right,
industries that it's
100%.
something that, like, another one is this was share of wallet or lifetime customer value. The other one is payback. So I had this conversation at at BTR, or sorry, at the NRHC Dallas like 2 weeks ago. And we're talking about churn, right? Cost of a churn, it was $4,500, $6,000. And I don't know if that's the right number or the middle of the number, but it's one of the numbers. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So at a 79% yield, 7.5% yield, what's that look like in a payback number? And the question was like, what's payback? I was like, well, payback is the cost of acquiring a new customer and how long it takes you to, based on a marginal basis, to pay back that cost of acquisition. And in this conversation, we should consider the cost of losing a customer because it's the same asset you're turning over.
Mhm. Yep.
So with the cost of, so like if you turn down a new fridge for a resident and then they bail, you're eating $6,000 of turn costs, but you might also be now like 18 months behind on marginal payback.
It's a great point.
And, because if you're looking at 7.5% and $200,000
Mhm.
homes, they got $15,000 a year. So let's say 6 months of 6 months of marginal payback. So then those kind of thinking, I feel like we're right on the edge of this all just coming crashing in, where, people from outside the industry are going to become, I don't say like fresh lights, but just fresh eyes on how this recurring revenue business is run. And that'll include the technology that's needed to do it. That'll include that we're talking about cost of acquisition, cost of retention are going to be considered together, like uniquely
Mhm.
rather than independently. And that lifetime customer value will be something that is a headline.
Right.
It'll be an analyst call conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which it is today in so many other industries. Certainly it's in tech, right? I mean, and that's the world we
Yeah.
come from, but but in a lot of other industries, it is today, right? Like where loyalty points actually matter, right? And
Mhm.
loyalty actually matters. And everybody, some other industries really strive to keep their customers because that loyalty drives, millions of dollars top line, right? So, yeah.
And consider that some, it's well understood that like, the Ford Focus as an example was actually a loss leader vehicle to get you into the Ford brand, right?
Right.
Because they knew if you bought that Ford and you had a good experience, you're going to buy 3, 4 more Fords from it. But
Right.
they actually had products that went to market as loss leaders. Like
Right.
that's because a lifetime strategy was such an important lifetime customer value was such an important number
Right.
for those industries.
And so you mentioned Ford. That's definitely, a brand that's been known for, a very long time, right? Also something I get curious about is, are any of the brands in our industries well known to customers? Or truly is it just, location and
Yeah,
price at the end of the day, right? No product differentiator. There's no real customer service differentiator. There's no real moment that wows. Is it, are we really just kind of each other over and over and over, like the airline industry did
right.
before JetBlue came in and kind of, turned things upside down, or Southwest when it was, back in the old days and turned things upside down. So, is the industry ripe for a real disruptor?
Well, this is the thing that has been coming up recently in a lot of conversations is like, you need to take a look at other entities that are really good at repeatability within a variable process. And so, and managing assets. So like, you kind of like um, the punch in the face example could be like McDonald's, right? McDonald's, who are experts at real estate management, experts at variable process, experts at roles that have high turnover staff, experts at producing uniform product, experts at branding, experts at all that marketing, all those things, and pricing and positioning and packaging. Like it doesn't, if you kind of step back and kind of squint your eyes a little bit, it doesn't feel too different. And it
Right.
could be really exciting coming up here.
Right. I agree. So necessity breeds innovation, right?
Right.
Having come from Silicon Valley and spending a ton of time there, at the end of the day, if you don't have a great business model in tech, your business will not succeed. I
Mhm.
think we've seen a little bit of that over the last several years as well, with maybe some consolidation, some prop tech that survived, some prop tech that's thriving now, as a matter of fact, right?
Mhm.
And so I think all the way around in this industry, we're going to see that necessity is going to breed innovation because margins are getting thinner. Operational efficiency has to become even better. Technology has to be automate as much as you possibly can, but with accountability and with ROI, not just for tech's sake because it has an AI name in the middle of it, right? Like truly, is
Yeah.
it deliver value? And then if it is, great. How are you holding, that business accountable for, utilizing that and capitalizing on that value?
Mhm. Kind of slowly going to wind this down a little bit here. When you think about, we got 3 or 4 more questions. Think about thought about innovation and the intake of innovation. So now you're out there talking to other customers. When you talk to them about innovation, how do they think about it?
Uh, I think it's still a little bit of the what's the latest and greatest tool out there
Yeah.
that's going to fix my problem today. And versus here's what I'm already paying for. Am I actually even using it fully? Do I understand how to take advantage of it? And then how can I, really optimize it to, benefit from it, and then use my vendor partners to potentially accelerate the benefits and value that I'm getting out of it. I love your tool, Guillermo and Iris. When I saw the demo on it, I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you, but I do believe that as efficiencies and operations have to become even more, I guess efficient. Something like what you have, where you can remotely diagnose, even remotely scope. Those are the kinds of things that I think is going to have to come out of what's happening today, where everybody's being squeezed a little bit. Is that kind of innovation, right? How do you build in the ability to remotely look at everything in your home
Mhm.
without you having to walk it all the time, without you having to visit it right off the bat, without you having to immediately put eyes on it, right? And be able to get, really good data, 70–80% of it right off the bat. And so I think that's the kind of stuff I'm really excited about seeing baked in. But today I'm still hearing, what's the latest and greatest tool out there
Right.
that you see that could solve my problem, like it's some sort of silver bullet.
Yeah.
There never has been a silver bullet in tech. There never will be a silver bullet in tech. You will always need people, process, and technology to be synchronized for you to get true value creation. The tech alone won't do it. And until we understand that fully, I think that's where we'll still, keep hitting our heads up against the wall as technologists, where, especially in the age of AI, everybody's looking at us to, have that AI silver bullet to fix every problem in the business. And so I really encourage the operators out there to look at their people and process first to see, hey, is it really, if I were to step back, how I want to do things, or reimagine it, and then what's the tech that's going to help me, automate all of that.
hmm Well, I think that, we're definitely in a conversation now where it's like, to your point, then the compression of available resources has made us sharpen our pencils a little bit. And that's going to create innovation, because and I think what's the unfortunate part about it, maybe this is just, that's life, is there's going to be winners and losers, because the banking of it isn't going to allow
Right.
it won't allow inefficiency to exist any longer.
Right.
So it may not feel uncomfortable today, like on the 26th of November, but it's going to start feeling very uncomfortable. Those that are choosing to acknowledge, own, and be accountable for operational efficiency, and those that are just hoping. I heard a great word, the hopium. There's hopium that will just, rent some up again.
There's a lot of folks bringing third-party property in-house. It's happening all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Are they doing it the same way their third-party property managers were, right? Or completely, reimagine how that happened, create a different, innovative, better customer experience, redesign before they bring it in-house, and then layer tech on top. Now that's innovative to me. That could change and move differently. And you get away from the hopium effect, and you really start to potentially create a product and and a service that customers are now looking and desiring. Who knows?
There's an opportunity there, no doubt about it, to differentiate on service. Like, if you go back to kind of like the laws of the value propositions of, I can compete on price, I can compete on price / OpEx, I can compete on product, innovation, or I can compete on service. And like, product is kind of like here, there, there. It could be location, but not everyone has access to the Miami Beach to build a condo, right? And so, like, from there, you got to figure out how you compete and how you're going to win, and you got to pick one, and then maybe you can pick a second, like a 2B or 2-1 or 1A.
Right.
Very cool. If you look back at your career and kind of like, especially given the experience, the collection of experiences you had, what's a piece of advice you'd offer yourself or offer somebody who is just having a first conversation with you, starting their career, or something to think about that you've kind of come to lean in on?
Oh gosh, wow. That's a really good one, Guillermo. I'll when I started, and I'm gonna take this from the perspective of a woman in tech, right? There wasn't very many people like me in technology. And when I was thinking about this the other day, I really benefited from many, many, many mentors in my day. And so even to this day, I really value coaching. I really value people who are willing to give me feedback. I really valued my mentors. And so I would encourage anyone to seek out and ask and just find a mentor, someone who's starting out. If you've been in the industry for decades, your biggest opportunity feedback from your teams, from your peers, if they're willing to give it to you. If you don't want it, I think that's an interesting sign in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's for a different conversation. But that to me is number one, is really feedback is everything. And if you're not willing to grow, then you don't want the feedback. If you're willing to grow, then you want the feedback. And that's kind of always been true and tried for me my entire career.
I heard the expression once, life is like a plant. If you're not growing, you're dying.
It's very true. Yeah, absolutely. There is no in between. There is no maintain. Yeah.
Oh, outstanding. Who should we talk to next? Thank you so much for this conversation, by the way.
That's a great question. I think it's really important that you start talking to some of the investors out there. I think it's really
I love it.
to hear from the investors and what they're thinking, what they're hearing. I know they're just as focused and motivated, at least the ones I know of, on the customer experience. And it's not just necessarily about just the balance sheet. And so I think it'd be interesting to get their perspective on where they see the next 3, 4, 5 years.
That's really good. Oh, that's going to put me on a whole rabbit hole. Good things. Thanks. I love that idea. Okay, I'm going to chase down some of that stuff. And if I need some connections that you might have, I might lean on you.
And then the residents, the customers.
Yes. Yeah.
Ask them.
That's going to be an interesting one to kind of put together. You are speaking. So speaking of coaching and feedback, you're speaking next week at SFR West on the women's panel, right?
Yes.
Outstanding. Anything to share about that?
So right here, right now, Yvonne Kenny is putting this together. She actually also runs the podcast, the website Inside the Vendor Network. Her and I were on a Women in SFR group and panel together when I was at Tricon, and having mentors and having feedback early in my career because there weren't a lot of women around was so important. Now that there are more women around in SFR or getting there, I think putting a panel together like this to also provide experiences and feedback to other women and men, supportive allies as well, is something that I think we're taking the opportunity to do at IMN. And more importantly, I'm excited because I'm going to be surrounded by 5 other amazing women, including Yvonne, so 6, I guess, that are going to be talking about their experiences. So I'm looking to learn, quite frankly, on what they have to say. So it should be fun. We did a little recording and we had a blast. It was
so wonderful. Fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there as well. I can't wait to see you guys and catch up with everybody. It's always a great awesome conference to end off the year. Wonderful. Well, I think that for everyone who's had a chance to listen today, thank you for all your for sharing your stories around deployments, implementations, kind of the kind of the ugly stuff around getting technology through. And I cannot understate the focus on the outcome that you guys got in an uplift perspective. For everybody who's out there who feels that they're kind of like in the dark when they're operating in a technology environment, like that is what's possible when you consider the bigger picture. Right, a $1.5 billion uplift on a public on a securitization because of the optimization and the automation and the sheer operational efficiency of the organization. It doesn't come without a vision. It doesn't come out without direction. It doesn't come without a few I'll say late nights, early mornings. But it is so worth it when you commit to it and you can deploy and make an organization run better. Particularly, and one thing we talked a lot about the resident experience, but the employee experience, and have a consideration on the employee experience when you're delivering and deploying technology, because ultimately that is going to enable your resident experience. You can't pick one or the other. You got to choose both. And so the path that you guys put forward in considering those stakeholders and then deploying that tech is super fascinating for me. Obviously, I get excited about that stuff. Thank you for listening today. It was lots of fun. Thank you for listening today. If you caught it today, if you're catching us in the podcast on Apple or Spotify, please subscribe. It always makes it easier for us to find us. Any comments or catching us on LinkedIn later. And I'm thrilled to see you next week in Phoenix. And thank you so much for your time today and all of your sharing your stories. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Guillermo.
All right. Stream over.